Have you ever looked out at a view and just thought, wow? Of course you have. But what if I told you that every single landscape is actually a book? It's filled with hidden stories of wind, water, and time. You have to learn the language. So together, let's dive in and learn how to read the stories that the world is telling us right in front of our eyes. We're going to use this incredible scene right here as our textbook. Now, at first glance, you see sand dunes, mountains, forests. It's beautiful, but it's also a really complex puzzle. Why are the dunes right there, next to that grassy area? Why are there different kinds of trees on the mountain? Every single piece is a clue. And that's the big question, isn't it? It can feel a little overwhelming, looking at all that and not knowing where to start. But it turns out there's a simple, really powerful method that geologists and ecologists use to decode any landscape. And by the end of this, you're going to be able to use it too.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the challenge of a complex picture. Then we'll get into a three-step process, just looking, asking why, and using a special kind of sketch. And then finally, we'll put it all together to read this landscape's full story. You ready? Let's do it.
Okay, so we're back at our scene. It's so easy to feel a little lost here. Your eye kind of jumps from the sand to the peaks, up to the clouds, and back again. The very first step to making sense of all this is to just slow down. We have to fight that urge to jump to conclusions. We need to gather the evidence first.
And that brings us to what might be the most important and honestly maybe the hardest step of all, just looking. We're going to scan this image and only state what we actually see. No interpretations, no judgments, not yet. It's all about collecting that raw data with our eyes before we even try to make sense of it. Okay, let's start over on the left side of the image. My eye is immediately drawn to that huge field of sand. We can see it's shaped into these big, rolling dunes. But what's missing? There's no obvious plant life, right? No trees, no grass, just sand. That's our first key observation. Now let's shift our focus to the foreground, right in front of those dunes. What's different? Well, everything. It's covered in what looks like these hardy grasses, some low-lying plants, and a few scattered bushes. It's a completely different world living right next door to the sand.
Okay, now let's lift our gaze up the mountainside. Look closely at the trees for a second. Do you see it? There seem to be two distinct bands. You've got a lower, darker, kind of denser forest, and then above it, a sparser, maybe even lighter colored forest that climbs higher up the slope. That's a really interesting detail.
And finally, let's look at the very, very top. Above that second band of trees, the peaks are just exposed, barren rock. That clear line where the trees just stop is called the tree line. Okay, so there we have it, 4 key observations. Now the fun part begins.
Now that we've collected our whats, it's time to move on to the whys. This is where we put on our detective hats. Why are there plants here, but not over there? Why do the forests change with height? We start to wonder, to guess. We start forming hypotheses.
So what do you think could be at play here? What actually controls where certain plants can grow? It could be the ground itself. Is it sand or is it soil? Maybe it's access to water. Or it could be bigger forces, like elevation, temperature, sunlight. These are what scientists call controlling factors, and they are the absolute key to our puzzle.
So to connect our observations with all our why questions, we're going to use a surprisingly simple but incredibly effective tool. And listen, this is not about being an artist, it's about being a thinker. We're going to make a sketch.
Now, this isn't just any doodle. It's called a concept sketch. The source material defines it as a sketch accompanied by complete sentences that explain the features, processes, and their interrelationships. Basically, it's a tool that forces you to actively connect what you see with why you think it's happening. And the brilliant thing is, anybody can do this. You don't need any fancy equipment, just a pencil, some paper, and your own curiosity. It's just an incredible way to organize your thoughts and truly understand a topic, not just memorize facts about it. All right, this is the moment we've been building up to. We've observed, we've questioned, and now we're going to use our concept sketch to piece together the entire story of this landscape. Let's see what it reveals. And here it is. This just perfectly illustrates how all our separate pieces of information start to connect. We can see the basic shapes of a landscape, sure, but the real magic is in the notes, the annotations that explain the why behind everything we saw. Let's break it down. Let's start with the dunes. The note explains our observation perfectly. Why are they barren? Well, because the sand is dry, it's nutrient poor, and it's constantly shifting in the wind. It's an unstable, harsh environment, making it pretty much impossible for most plants to take root.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
So what about the grassy area? The sketch explains that this ground is flatter and a lot more stable. It has actual soil, which is great at holding on to moisture and nutrients. So the key difference isn't just what's on top, it's the foundation itself. And that's what allows these plants to thrive.
Now for those two forests we spotted. The annotation confirms our hunch. The lower forest, that's home to trees like juniper and pinyon, which are adapted to drier conditions. Higher up, you get conifers, which thrive in cooler temperatures. The simple interpretation? Elevation is controlling everything. As you go up, the conditions change, and so do the trees that can survive there. And finally, the barren peaks. The note gives us the simple, clear answer. They are above the tree line. At that altitude, it's just too cold, and the growing season is way too short for trees to survive. And that right there just brilliantly illustrates the direct impact of elevation on life. It's that simple.
So there you have it, a simple, repeatable, three-step method for reading any landscape. First, you observe the what without jumping to conclusions. Second, you ask why, and you brainstorm the controlling factors. And third, you sketch and annotate to connect all your ideas into one coherent story.
Let's just go back one last time to where we started. It's the same beautiful picture, but now you see it differently, don't you? You don't just see shapes and colors anymore. You see the invisible forces, the why that shaped every single thing you're looking at. And that's the real takeaway here. This skill isn't just for epic mountain scenes. It works everywhere. So the next time you look outside your window, or at a park, or even at a crack in the sidewalk where a weed is growing, ask yourself, what story is this landscape telling me?